Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Voice of Crypto's podcast, where we talk about all things crypto, Web3, and blockchain. And in our special episodes, that is Voices of Web3, we bring some of the top voices from the Web3 crypto blockchain space. And today we have with us another such amazing person from the Web3 space, that is Ram from Router Protocol. So we'll, of course, be talking about a lot of revolutionary things. So I'll let the three R's take over for today. That is Ram, Router, and Revolutionizing. How are you, Ram?
I'm good, Varuni. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show and excited to be here. Looking forward to a conversation.
Absolutely. The pleasure's all ours. And I would kick off this chat today and the first question that I always ask my guests is, how did you land up in the Web3 space? This is quite a bit of a rabbit hole, and we've all had our fair share of time in Web2 or tech or traditional finance, TradFi. What did your life look like before cryptocurrencies, Web3, and blockchain? And how do you sort of pivot towards this space, Ram?
Yeah, good question. I'll quickly cover that. I am very much of a journeyman. I've tried a bunch of things. This profile that's pretty good academically. You get good grades and you ace through all the competitive exams and you get all the right, so to the NIT, the IIM, and then I ended up at MIT with an MBA, but never sort of figured what would really kick my and now found my calling. Right, this is it. So and then did some technology, some product management, some uh, research, some banking research, some private equity, some boutique IB, some investing. But yeah, I guess sometime in 2015 or 16 is when I jumped full time into crypto, and the transition was, it was sort of related to what I was doing before that. I was trying to at a uh, decent bit of success with trying to um, take these pre-IPO securities from the US primarily, so Uber, Alibaba, Airbnb, etc., and sell them to package them appropriately and then sell them to an audience in the East primarily, so investors in Singapore and Indonesia and Dubai and that part of the world. Um, and I'd also sort of stumbled on this thing called blockchain, and there's a bee in my bonnet that basically said, you know what, why don't you tokenize these things and let people enjoy? And also, obviously, selfish interest was instead of trying to convince a large investor to buy a 2 or 3 million chunk of a Uber or whatever pre-IPO, it would be better if we had a market and people could come in and buy $10 worth of Uber or whatever, Flipkart or so that was the genesis of how I got into crypto full time, and yeah. So since then I've been trying to build and iterate, and that's when we've finally figured out this is where it brings together. If you're sort of a curious mind, if you're interested in technology and finance and economics and all that, and obviously entrepreneurship. So this is a great space to be and good time to be, and that's how the journey started.
Absolutely. And what was the idea behind router protocol? What are, let's say, the founding, like the basis of this foundation that you've laid? How does it tie up blockchain tech and bring some advantage to users? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I think the 30,000-foot view is very clear. Blockchains are like cities, are like ecosystems, and they are thriving ecosystems. They're thriving cities. No one blockchain is going to win it all. Even Ethereum has multiple elements. And then you have the Cosmos part of the world, you have Solana, you have Sui, Aptos, all these guys. So it's like a city, and there are multiple islands and multiple. It's like a map, and there are multiple ecosystems and communities, and clearly you need the ability to sort of try and get communication between these chains, and that is, I guess, the genesis of interoperability and cross-chain messaging and so on and so forth. Now, just drilling down one more level from the 30,000 to the 15,000, there are three different ways to look at it. You had um, there's a whole paradigm shift happening. Initially, you had pre 2019, 2018. The problem was, I have a token on a chain. I want to get it across to another chain. That was the big problem in interoperability, right? At some point, the problem became, what? How do I do generic message passing, right? And so now the problem has become even more complex. How do I do generic message passing and token transfer, and depending on the context, optimize my path, right? So it was almost like the airline industry. Pre 1905, you had the Wright brothers in a cornfield in Iowa, cycles, and some rudimentary flying machines. That was, I guess, Thorchain, the pioneers in the space, right? And then between '05 and 37, you had these big airships, the Zeppelins, right? And they were very popular. Hindenburg was the most famous one, and had a spectacular blow up somewhere in New York. And that's exactly what you see. Between 21 and 24, all the big boys you've seen, they raised a ton of capital. Huge TVL-based monoliths, single point of failure. Somebody hacks into any of these guys, the whole ecosystem goes down. Even, yeah, some of them got hacked. I think Wormhole or somebody got hacked. Obviously, the balance sheet came in and they sort of made the users whole. But fundamentally, the system was flawed, inefficient. We all know for multiple reasons. I believe we are entering the third epoch in terms of cross-chain interoperability, and that again that aligns well with the aviation industry, because post 37 is when the era of truly transnational aviation took off. Right, you had highly sophisticated supply chains. You have the Airbus and the Boeings, but then you have well, if you can call Boeing sophisticated these days, because you have doors blowing off. Anyway, jokes apart, you have Rolls Royce, you have almost 1,000 players in the supply chain. You have somebody providing the nuts and bolts, the seed, the architecture, the exhaust systems, the electricity. It's a beast. It's literally rocket science, right? So that's where interoperability is heading into, and what you're seeing is that trend happening where you need to have that ability to customize across. Customized to the context, depending on whether it's L2 to L2 communication, or whether it's L1 to L2 or Ethereum to Cosmos. So you need to have the ability to sort of customize. You want to have the ability to sort of both have the basic token transfer and the message passing. And so those are some of the things, along with the whole chain abstraction narrative, that we have been sort of pioneering with our approach at Router, and the products are coming on top of Router.
Absolutely. So Router is definitely doing quite a bit in this space. However, interoperability has always been a challenge, and blockchains have sort of fought against each other. Now, the narrative around interoperability is getting better. How does Router
Yeah.
protocol place itself between all of that, and what is the larger sector looking like in terms of just cross-chain bridging? And are there competitions? Like, what are your competitors? How does competition wane versus Router? If you could just give an overview of the sector in that term.
Absolutely. Two-part question. What is our approach? How is that different from the competitors? And we sort of covered that in the previous question. And the
You did,
overall space, right? I think. Sorry.
you did cover a
Okay.
little bit of that in the last question.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. But I think a little bit of historical context is interesting, right? Again, if you look at what happened in the Web 2.0 era, some of us again. That's a nice white cat right behind you. Super cute.
That's a guest entrance. That's a guest entry. I'll have to take him out after this.
Yes. No. I think she has a lot of deep views on Web3 and interoperability. So let her chime in too.
Yeah. I will have to
And
take
there
him
she
out.
goes. She's gone. That's
Sorry about that.
beautiful. No, don't worry about it. Not at all. Not at all. So, I think the analogy, like you saying, and it's a valid viewpoint. I don't think it's exactly like to like. Uh, in the mid '90s, there were a bunch of operating systems. You had Windows. obviously Windows or Mac, those are two big ones. But then they had all these Linux flavors, and then IBM OS, which was another version of Linux, and then you had uh, yeah, Santa Clara. Yeah, there's basically a bunch of different operating systems, right? And depending on if you're a if you're building enterprise software, you have to worry about the operating system, you have to worry about the application layer stack, application server stack, and so there were a bunch of monolithic stacks, right? And so the very big fragmentation in terms of the developer experience, right? And as an end user as well, there was a fair bit of fragmentation. And the one thing that happened in terms of unifying or sort of fixing that was the cloud. And once the cloud came, right, as a developer, you just worried about what is happening with AWS or Microsoft or whatever, right? That's all you worried about. And as an end user, all you needed was maybe an Android store, Apple Store, or a Google Doc link or whatever. And you had a fairly standardized end user experience. And the infra layer, the complexity was pushed under the hood. You see what's happening in blockchain right now. This sort of parallels to that. As an end user, right now, if I'm an Arbitrum, I'm doing some GMX, I'm doing some perp lending, borrowing, perp trading. It's a very different experience. And if I go to Polygon, I have a very different experience. And each of these developers are forced to choose some of these cards, right? Now that's good. These L1s, the blockchains are doing important work in terms of decentralization, but the complexity should not be like, I mean, there is a difference between a Volvo and let's say a BMW and like a Suzuki, right? But at the end of the day, folks should not uh, have to sort of open up the hood and appreciate. If you want to, you can, but the average driver should not really worry about what's under the hood. You have the steering wheel, the gear, the whatever, right? So that is important, right? And then that's where the abstraction, the chain abstraction narrative is coming on. Because at the end of the day, users and developers both don't need to worry about what chain they're interacting with. They need to sort of pick and choose what their user front end, where that is, where the data layer is, where the execution is, right? So that level of modularity apart, they need a full-fledged chain abstraction where they don't need to really worry about what chain they're building for, right? So I think that's what you see, what's happening, account abstraction, intents, all that cross-chain intents, etc. That is all leading up to a broader meta chain or chain abstraction narrative. And that's where I think Router Chain is one of the few projects in the vanguard of this movement as we move to the epoch 3 of interoperability.
Right. If I may, how was bear market looking for router protocol? A lot of, I know Web3 enterprises were badly hit in terms
Yep.
of revenues. How were your balance sheets looking like? Was it ever seemingly way too tough to imagine an out of that? And do times look different now comparison to, let's say, a year ago from now?
Look, I think there is a balance sheet aspect to it, definitely. I think, you're worried about what your runway is. But so more than that, that we're mostly okay. But the bigger thing was what the morale was, what the momentum was. And so you want your smartest folks to continue to work with you, build with you, right? You don't want them to look at Web 2 or some other options and go do the PhDs or the masters in other countries. And, you have, so when you have a smart team, there's always a risk, right? That is more a worry, but it's been good. What has happened is, sometimes they say that what happens, sometimes you wait for 2-3 years to happen. So crypto's like that. Sometimes nothing happens for 2-3 years, and sometimes 2-3 years happens in a couple of weeks. So literally that has been the case for us with Router. Sort of touching back to earlier question, how does Router differentiate itself, right? We did two things. We sort of went hard in the intent cross-chain intents framework. And so we realized that there are two parts to bridging. One is a token transfer aspect, where 90% of today's use cases are, how do I get my token from one chain to another chain? Right? That is front and center. That's the degen use case. That is the big opportunity. You have to address for that as a smart business. But the smart technology, yes, as part of the technological innovation, what we've also done is obviously in the first part we launched this thing called Router Nitro last week, which is by far the fastest, cheapest way to get across from any chain, right? I think the closest competitor is maybe 30% slower than us. So we are 30% cheaper and faster than the closest competitor, right? And so that part, token transfer bridge, that is sorted. But we are actually even more excited about what that means. So earlier, router was just a bridge, but with the launch of router chain, it is now a full-fledged layered N or layered one or layered zero or whatever you want to call it, which is you're sort of building, providing infrastructure for a lot of apps to come and build natively cross-chain apps. We're empowering developers to forget about the underlying chain and build natively cross-chain apps. And that is super interesting. So one such app that is actually going to launch very soon is something called Stakeys. And what Stakeys does is literally right now, if you want to take your Ethereum from, let's say, an Arbitrum and then go address the eigenlayer, go put that in eigenlayer to sort of participate in eigenlayer, which LSD is the big narrative now, restaking derivatives and all that. It's 20 steps. So you want to go to Arbitrum, transfer that to Lido or Stader or whatever, and then from there go to Kelp or EtherFi or Renzo, and then move. There's multiple steps. It's like 30 minutes. We reduced that to 2 clicks and 2 minutes, right? That's huge UI innovation, right? And so there is one such product that uses the cross-chain intent frameworks that we just launched last month, and Router Nitro is also a bridge based on that. There are two other projects coming up, building very interesting things on top of the whole LSD stack, right? So broadly, the token transfer we probably are the best solution in the market, arguably. And from a developer perspective, this cross-chain intent framework is really powerful in terms of how it enables users to build beautiful natively cross-chain dApps without worrying about the underlying chain complexity.
That makes sense. I think you spoke about the amazing Nitro as well as a few other enterprises or apps that are building atop that. What sort of adoption are you expecting for Nitro throughout this year, and what sort of, let's say, predictions do you have in mind for not just Nitro but Router at large?
I think for Nitro, you know, we are in the process of getting into some of the aggregators. We are talking to wallets. We just launched last week, so it's a bit of an alpha net, alpha mainnet type feel to it. We are capping the transactions at $5,000. So we don't want to sort of rush it given the security needs of the system. Uh, but we reckon once people start using it, they see how fast, how cheap it is. We will add more liquidity, and we should, just from a B2C direct consumer aspect, we should have 10 to 15% of the bridging market, token transfer market. And if you include the products that are building on top of router chain, that should really add, especially on the staking side. Like Stakey's testnet itself, there is almost 300, 350 ETH already tied up. We are talking with one of the largest staking players in that space. So when the eigen cap opens up in a few days, you're going to see a rush of transactions into eigen through some of these staking platforms. And a good chunk of that is going to be on Stakeys that uses router in the background. So just going back to, sometimes nothing happens for years, and sometimes a few years happens in a few weeks, right? We had a bit of a miscommunication in the last week where somebody started creating FUD around, we inflating our token supply to 20 million to a billion. And we had to sort of speed up, expedite our governance process, the token proposal. So we did a sprint over the weekend, push that out. We're going to push out Stakeys. There is a few other strategic conversations happening around. This is we reckon this between now and March is when 3-4 years gets compressed to a couple of months.
Absolutely. And you spoke about staking at length, also about stakies, which is in itself a little bit more revolutionary. But if I'm not wrong, throughout the last couple of years, staking as a concept, yields weren't high, staking wasn't getting as many profit to uh, validators as it did earlier. Do you think that
Uh-huh.
staking is going to make a comeback this year? And we're also expecting quite a few Web3 assets to sort of make a comeback throughout this year. Will staking be one of those? And how has the staking ecosystem looked like throughout last year? What are you expecting for that sector this year?
I think staking never went away, right? I think staking rewards because the token prices are down. From an asset
Yeah.
allocation perspective, at risk-adjusted returns, the average Web two average money manager who's not completely invested in Web three is thinking, you know what, I get 2-3% here on a low risk. I get 5-6% here there if I stake with a pretty high risk on a relative basis, right? So from a risk-adjusted basis, the returns are maybe marginally not competitive, but especially with the market, the macro, the interest rate cuts, and all the flush of liquidity that's about to come into the systems and the US election cycle, and the usual macro narratives. Um, the staking has already picked up. Right? If you look at Eigenlayer, for instance, right, the caps are opening, and I think the fifth or something. There is a ton of interest,
Mhm.
and you also have the new narrative around how these new ecosystems are launching, and that's something that even we might consider between our close minute launch and our router chain launch in a few months, where we might think about incentivizing folks through airdrops and points and tokens and all that. So that is a big narrative. So the bull market is sort of here. People just sort of, you never know when peak bull market is until Elon Musk tweets and the whole market tanks and you realize, oh shit, that was the bull market and that was the end of it. Right? So it's creeping up on us, right? And before you know it, yeah, it's going to be crazy again. And yeah, but I mean, there's a thing, right? I mean, there are two different constituencies in crypto. There is the trader community that is, always looking at tokens and doing its thing. But there's a builder community, right? For the builder community, the bear and the bull is not okay. The bull is good. You're sort of happy, but the bear market is when all the work gets done. So I reckon that for us at Router, as well as for all the amazing projects out there, the next 2-3 quarters are going to be super, super critical and important because this is when the market sees what we built and over the last 2 years, and the potential and the impact of some of these applications.
Absolutely. So we're definitely talking about changing narratives this year. Also
Yeah.
expecting a bull market, and I usually like to give a disclaimer that none of what we say is financial advice. Always
Yes.
do your own research.
100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In a market as volatile as the crypto market. But nonetheless, what would be
Yes.
some of your top, let's not call them predictions, maybe expectations from this year?
Yeah, I think it's already a reality. The whole staking market is blowing up. People are going to figure out, the staking is huge. That, as I said, the second is, the whole interoperability thing that's been thought of as an addendum to the overall blockchain thing. But this year, interoperability will be front and center. It will be something that is essential for any app, right? By in another 7-8 months, if you're a app that is starting out new, and if you're not thinking of cross chain, and if you're saying that okay, I'm on this chain and I'm not on that chain, you are going to be a dinosaur. You're going to build natively cross-chain apps, and you might use router, you might use any of the exciting competitors that are coming up. But interoperability, cross-chain, the whole account, the chain abstraction piece will be front and center when you develop a app. I think that's going to be a huge trend.
Absolutely. And AI was sort of the buzzword for last year. Has
Yeah.
Router sort of deep dived into that tech, and what sort of a future do you see for AI and the integration of Web3 or blockchain throughout this year?
So we are looking at AI in many different ways. It's still very much drawing board stage. We have some foundational thoughts on AI, which probably a longer call. But even within the context of intents, we think that AI has a space where we think that if you want to sort of look at how we can build effective hooks for folks. So one of the things that we're doing is trying to figure out what. Just keep on saying, just going to get out of the car. Uh, so one of the things that we're doing from a AI perspective is in terms of fundamentally cross-chain hooks that we're building, right? And so if you are a developer and if you want to sort of come in and build a sort of a app that uses Lido and Stader and some of those cross-chain parameters around staking and lending and borrowing, right? So that we take care for you as a developer. Similarly, if you want to build something in the DEX space, we give you hooks into your what do you call it, Uniswap or SushiSwap or all these QuickSwap and define all these DEXs. So at the moment, there's a fairly manual process where developers do this. So there's one area where we're thinking of using AI and sort of automatically surfacing the most popular products and creating plugins into them so that developers can come in and just plug in and build what they want. So those are some of the ideas that are more revolutionary. There are some revolutionary ideas, but that will go into, why does Ethereum exist? Can we reinvent Ethereum using or sort of start conversation around how DAGs are more interesting for AI nodes on the blockchain because they just fundamentally more scalable. But there's a slightly broader conversation for another time.
Absolutely. And we're almost at the end of a lovely, lovely chat with you, Ram. Do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap it up today?
Not really. I think it's been a great conversation for me, and yeah, always excited to chat more about crypto and interoperability, and yeah, hopefully we do this again soon.
Absolutely. And all the way best to you with the Nitro, which is, of course, seemingly as power packed as we spoke about a while back. So, all the way best with that. And hope Router, much like the rest of the crypto market, has a bright future this year. Thanks once again, Ram, for joining us. And hope to talk to you
My
really
pleasure.
soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you shortly in another episode tomorrow. And thanks again, Ram, for joining us. Big shout out to you and Router Protocol. Bye bye. We'll see you next day.
Bye bye. Thank you.